Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today. Please tell us your full name and the position you currently hold.
My name is Faith Whitmore, and I'm the Executive Director at Francis House Center in Sacramento.
Can you tell us a little bit about your family of origin, where you were born, where you grew up, all that?
My father was a United Methodist pastor, and he was assigned to a little church out in Nevada, in Smith Valley, Nevada. So I was born in that beautiful, beautiful sagebrush country.
Okay. And do you have siblings or?
I'm one of 4 children. My oldest sister is an educator and lives on the East Coast. My older brother is a produce broker, lives in this beautiful Salinas Valley. And my younger brother lives up in Paradise, which it really is paradise up there. And he works as a printer.
I have a friend whose mother lives up there.
Yeah.
So you stayed in Nevada till you became an adult?
No, I was born in Nevada, but our family soon moved to California, to Sacramento. I lived here through elementary school, left, and came back many years later.
So you were raised as a Methodist?
Correct.
Could you tell us about your post-secondary education?
So I also went to seminary and was ordained in the United Methodist pastor as a United Methodist pastor. So I've been ordained since 1984 and served churches for 27 years before I came here to Francis House. So I went to school at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. And
there's a bunch of different religions that use that same place, right?
Right. So it's a consortium of 9 seminaries. The one that I went to was Pacific School of Religion, and then the big umbrella is the Graduate Theological Union. So there were United Methodists and UCC, Franciscans, Jesuits, I forget which other.
I talked to a Franciscan who went there.
Yeah, Episcopalian. So it was a really rich opportunity because there were all these different faith communities all learning together. Yeah, it was great.
That sounds great. So tell us exactly what degrees you hold.
So I did my undergraduate work. I started at Santa Barbara and became involved in a intentional living community focused on peace issues. It was toward the end of the Vietnam War. Ended up transferring, and our whole group moved up to Santa Cruz. I was the only student by that time, and I developed my own major in peace studies. So I have a BA in peace studies from UC Santa Cruz, and then a Master of Divinity from the Pacific School of Religion.
That peace studies, was that something that, like a program that you made, or it's a program they had?
No, I developed it at Santa Cruz at the time. One could develop one's own major, and so it was something that I put together. It was a lot of extra work, actually, because I had to go to the professors and convince them that this would be a degree worthy of
their name.
So actually, I was the first one in the UC system to graduate with that degree, but since then there have been others who have followed. But I was the first one who did that.
Great. That sounds like a great major piece.
Yeah, it was great.
You know, we have 3 major war academies in this country. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a peace academy?
Well, you know what? I even forget the name of it right now, but they're trying, and they're asking for 1% of the Pentagon budget to develop a Department of Peace. And hardly anybody knows about that, but the effort is underway. And their focus would be to, I shouldn't be speaking for them, but anyway, it's a great thing to look up. Their focus would be...
What's the name of their organization?
I think it's the Department of Peace.
Okay, I'll look it up.
I think it is. You know, it's sort of to address violence at all levels, to put people in countries before war breaks out, to try and mediate some kind of understanding before we ever get there, also to look at the violent level. So many of the violent incidences happen because people have been either abused or traumatized in their young life. So it has all sorts of possibilities, but we're just so focused on the war economy, I think that...
You know, peace isn't just not shooting people.
Right.
So
Well, I think that model of one-to-one and relationship, that's what will change the world. That's what does change the world, you know.
It's the only way you can.
Right.
It seems cumbersome because we're used to mass production at this point.
Right.
But...
And the mass scale. Here in Sacramento, we are so blessed to have the interfaith community that we have. So, for instance, I've only been at Francis House since June. So I was a pastor here 24 years before I came here in Sacramento. And we had the most wonderful relationship with the synagogue down the street and also the mosque. So the three congregations are the United Methodist congregation, the synagogue, and the mosque. We would get
Which
together.
synagogue is it?
It was Beth Shalom. We also did things with B'nai Israel, but Beth Shalom was right down the street from us. Excuse me. And Salam, which is Sacramento Area League of Associated Muslims. They're probably the most open and liberal. And so the three of us would get together and we would do childcare for each other. We celebrated Thanksgiving together. There was just constant relationship. And when people know each other, same thing here. When people know each other and take the opportunity, they find out how much more alike we are than unalike. And that's that poem from Maya Angelou, that ends with, "We are so much more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. We are so much more alike than we are unalike." And I think that for me in my life, that is certainly something that has been foundational. And that was really instilled in me by my parents. As we were growing up, there were 4 kids. My dad was a pastor. Didn't make much money, had small houses, but there was always room for more. So we lived, and when I go back and look at the house where we grew up in the early years, and I think, oh my gosh, how in the world did they do that without going crazy? Because it was like a 1,000 square foot house, 4 kids, and we always had somebody else living with us.
And 4 dogs too. No, I'm just kidding.
we had 1 dog, but we always had somebody else living with us. If somebody needed a place to stay, our home was always welcome. And the lesson that my parents taught more than anything, I think, was respect. And so it didn't matter what somebody's title was, it mattered that they were a human being. So my parents would treat the garbage man the same as they would treat the bishop, and that was something they just forever instilled in us. Titles don't matter, people do. So be respectful of all people. And I think that's one of the things here at Francis House that is also foundational to this wonderful agency that's been around for over 40 years, is it's based on dignity and respect. So when the homeless people or near homeless or indigent or whatever their category might be, when they come in our front doors, they're met with individual volunteers who take them, sit with them individually, talk to them, find out what they need, and treat them like real persons. They don't go through this huge, anonymous line, where they don't have a name and a face. They have identity here, and it matters. It really matters.
What's the mission of Francis House?
The mission of Francis House is to, as I mentioned earlier, to be it's a triage center for the homeless. The newly homeless, chronically homeless. They don't have to be homeless to come here, and some aren't, but it's...
They could just be afraid of being homeless, maybe.
Well, there was a story that I'll never forget. There was somebody who knocked on that door, a nicely dressed gentleman. I thought he was one of our volunteers because at that point I didn't know all of our volunteers. So we chatted for a while, and then I asked him what program he was working with that day, and he said, no. He said, I'm here because I need help. He said, I don't know how to be homeless. And he had just lost his house to foreclosure. He had been ill, lost his job. It was one of those cycle, domino effect where he got sick, lost his job, led to losing his house. And there's a whole culture of homelessness that one has to learn to survive. And it was so telling to me. He said, I don't know how to be homeless. It's hard being homeless. It takes so much time, things that people don't think about, but it takes so much time. So basically he was here to say, help me figure this out. And hopefully we
Were you able to keep him from becoming homeless?
Well, after a while I didn't see him anymore, so I hope that was a good thing. Some people just need a few tools. And for him, he actually had been a nurse, and while he was sick, he lost his license only because he didn't re-register. And so what he needed was a couple of $100 to get his nursing license activated again, and then start making applications. But then he has to have a phone, and he has to have an address, and there are lots of things. Once you fall all the way off the cliff and land, it's much harder. So one of the things we try and do for people is catch them before they fall all the way down. But the economy is so tough right now, and money is tight, and grants are, not what they used to be.
Which leads me to the next question: where do you get your funding from?
Well, there are still foundations that we get some of our money from, some public funds. So we have an emergency shelter program for families with minor children, and we do get some county money for that. We get some money from some of the banks that have foundations that still are able to share some of
How
that.
large is your budget?
Our budget is about $500,000.
And how many people, how many individuals or families do you serve a year?
Well, our number is about 30,000 at some level or
With
another.
$500,000?
Yeah.
You are frugal.
We are very frugal. In fact, almost everybody who's here right now is volunteering because we had to lay people off. Excuse me. We're so committed to our money going where it most needs to be that a number of people even sort of laid themselves off and said, we'll just keep working until the economy gets better so that we can continue to serve our clients. It's an amazing group of people here, amazingly committed.
In our society, many people aren't so committed.
Mm-hmm.
Can you help us understand that commitment? Help us, someone not like me who's trying to doing this service, but someone who's not of service.
Mm-hmm.
How can they look at you, someone who would voluntarily say, I waive my paycheck, but I'm still going to work here?
Mm-hmm.
Help us understand that person's thoughts and motivations.
My experience is that when we help other people, we find deep meaning in life. When we live only unto ourselves or get caught up in the whole commercialism and capitalistic, you can cut that part out, but when we find
Self-serving.
yeah, self-serving or limited life, or I'm just going to take care of my own, or I'm just going to work at a job that doesn't mean a lot, and then I'm going to go home and recover and go back the next day. The meaning of life is missed, and I find that.
So what is the meaning of life?
Well, I think the meaning of life is to be of service to each other and to God. That's what I believe. And what are they supposed to do? Be of service. If everybody was of service to each other and engaged with each other and finding out the commonalities of life, and that really we are all on this earth together. It's human beings along the way who have drawn those lines in the map. But really, we are living on this globe together. We are all interconnected. And when we understand that, then I think meaning bubbles up and life becomes richer. So I actually feel badly for people who just want to stay isolated and unto themselves or unto just their family or something, because I think there's so much more that they could be experiencing. We all have different gifts. I'm very comfortable working in this environment with the homeless. I've worked some with gang members. I mean, I'm comfortable in this arena. I'm also comfortable, as I've done, speaking at the state capitol, saying the prayers for the Senate and Assembly. I've been blessed to be able to walk many paths, and so that's fun. It's
Do you have a
diverse.
retirement from your time as a minister?
I do. Yeah.
Please tell us about the structure of a Catholic worker community.
The Catholic worker communities have been around for decades. It's Catholic with a small c.
Meaning
Meaning
they don't care if you're Catholic.
Correct. It's interfaith. Mostly Christian, but anybody is allowed. Very loose structure. There was Dorothy Day was the founder of the Catholic Worker Movement back in New York City in the Bowery. Basically the same kind of work that I cycled all the way around. It's working with the poor and caring for the poor.
But when I say structure, because you were a newly ordained not Catholic minister,
Mm-hmm.
but you worked with them. Was it a job where you got a paycheck? What's the structure? Is everyone a volunteer? Do they provide housing? What's the structure?
So actually, I did that before I went to seminary.
Okay.
I've kept those relationships, but I did that before seminary. So the structure of the Catholic worker communities is very organic. There's a loose connection nationally, but each Catholic worker house is in and of itself. So they can figure it out any way that they want it. So for instance, I spent time up in Seattle at the Catholic Worker House there. We had a big old house downtown, 3 or 4 stories. We opened our basement, created it for families who needed shelter. Everybody in the house worked. There was no salary that was paid, so everybody worked in order to support the
So
work that we
everybody
did.
had outside jobs.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So there's no Catholic worker community where they are paid for the work that they do. Everybody has to do something in order to keep that going.
Keep the lights on.
Correct. So we had shelter in Seattle mainly for families.